I still remember the exact moment my wife told me she was dating other men. We were sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays, paid bills, and planned our future. She looked strangely calm, almost relieved. Then she placed her phone on the table and said, "I need you to understand something. I'm seeing other men now." For a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. Other men? I asked. She nodded without even looking ashamed. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "If you really want me, fight for me." I stared at her, waiting for the woman I married to come back. She never did. We had been married for 8 years. I had always believed our marriage was ordinary in the best possible way. We worked, paid our mortgage, argued about stupid things, laughed over dinner, and made plans for the future. But during the previous year, something inside my wife had slowly changed. She started staying late at work. Her phone became something she guarded like a secret. She began dressing differently whenever she went out without me. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, she would smile and say, "You're imagining things." I believed her because I loved her. Looking back, I realized I wasn't imagining anything. I was simply refusing to see what was right in front of me. That night, after she told me she was dating other men, I asked one question. "Are you asking for a divorce?" She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Not necessarily." Her answer confused me even more. "Then what exactly do you want?" She smiled. "I want to see how badly you want to keep me." I waited for the rest. "You become comfortable," she continued. "You stop chasing me. You stop making me feel desirable. Maybe these other men remind me that I still have options." I felt something inside me break, but I refused to let her see it. She expected anger. She expected begging. She expected me to promise everything would change. Instead, I quietly stood up. "You're right," I said. "You have options." She looked surprised. "That's it." I nodded. "That's it." She laughed nervously, almost as if she thought I was pretending to be strong. "You're seriously not going to fight for me?" I looked directly into her eyes. "I don't fight people who are already walking away." Her smile disappeared. She followed me toward the hallway. "So you're just giving up?" she asked. I stopped at the bedroom door. "No, I'm accepting your decision." Then I took my wedding ring off, placed it on the dresser, and walked into the guest room. I didn't sleep that night, but neither did she. I could hear her moving around the house until nearly sunrise. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee, checked her phone, and casually mentioned that she had dinner plans that evening. I simply nodded. "Okay." She stared at me. "You're not going to ask who I'm meeting?" "No." Her expression hardened. "You don't care?" I looked up from my coffee. "I care. That's exactly why I'm not going to compete with someone for a place that used to be mine." She went silent. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. She had expected jealousy. Instead, she got silence. That evening, she dressed carefully, sprayed perfume, and walked past me toward the front door. Before leaving, she turned around as if expecting me to stop her. I didn't. 3 days passed. Then a week. My wife continued going out, but something had changed. She started coming home earlier. She stopped talking about the men she was seeing. She also began watching me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. Meanwhile, I quietly started rebuilding my life. I opened a separate bank account, contacted a lawyer, and began looking for a small apartment. I didn't tell her any of this. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. One evening, while I was packing a box in the garage, she appeared behind me. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Moving some things." Her eyes narrowed. "Where?" I looked at her and answered calmly, "Somewhere I can finally breathe." She stared at me for several seconds before whispering, "You're actually leaving me?" I closed the box and stood up. "You told me to fight for you." I thought about it. Then I realized something. She waited. Love isn't supposed to be a competition. I shouldn't have convinced my own wife that I'm worth choosing. Her face changed instantly. The confidence she had carried for weeks seemed to disappear. "I never said I wanted you to leave," she whispered. I shook my head. "You didn't have to." Your actions said it for you. She stepped closer. What if I made a mistake? I looked at her, and for the first time since our marriage began, I didn't feel responsible for saving her from the consequences of her own choices. Then you'll have to live with it, I said. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for my hand. I stepped back, and that was the moment she finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. But what she didn't know was that I had already discovered something about the men she was dating, something she had desperately tried to hide from me. And when I finally found out who one of them really was, I realized our marriage had been built on a lie much bigger than cheating. The man my wife had been seeing was someone I knew, not a stranger from a bar, not some random person she had met online. His name was Daniel, and for nearly 3 years, he had been one of my closest friends. I had invited him into our home, introduced him to my wife, and trusted him enough to tell him things I never told anyone else. When I saw his name on a message buried inside an old notification, my stomach dropped. The message was simple. Are you sure he still doesn't know? I read it twice. Then I understood. My wife hadn't simply started dating other men. She had been hiding a relationship with my friend. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted the truth, not another argument where she could twist the story and make me question myself. So I quietly checked the details I already had. Dates, messages, restaurant receipts, and conversations suddenly started connecting. The nights she claimed she was working late were nights she had been meeting Daniel. The weekend she said she needed space was the same weekend Daniel had posted a photograph from a hotel several hours away. I had seen that photograph months earlier and thought nothing of it. Now every detail felt like a piece of a puzzle I never wanted solved. That evening, my wife walked into the living room and found me sitting in the dark. She switched on the light. "Why are you sitting here like this?" she asked. I looked at her and said, "How long?" Her face immediately changed. "How long what?" I placed Daniel's name on the table. She stopped breathing for a second. "How long have you been seeing him?" She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then she whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen." I almost laughed. "That's your explanation?" She began crying. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I shook my head. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think I'd ever find out." Then she said something I never expected. "Daniel told me you were planning to leave me." I stared at her. "What?" She wiped her tears. "He said you had become unhappy. He said you were talking about divorce, and that you didn't love me anymore." For a moment, everything went silent. I realized Daniel hadn't simply taken advantage of my marriage. He had been manipulating both of us. He had convinced my wife that I was already abandoning her, while secretly positioning himself as the man who would save her. I suddenly understood why she had been so confident when she told me to fight for her. She believed I was a villain in a story someone else had written. I called Daniel that night. He answered casually. "Hey, man, what's up?" I didn't yell. "You tell me." Silence. Then he asked, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm talking about my wife." Another long silence followed. Finally, he said, "Listen, things between us got complicated." I interrupted him. "You were my friend." His voice became defensive. "Your marriage was already falling apart." I closed my eyes. "You helped make it fall apart." He tried to explain, but I didn't want explanations anymore. Before ending the call, I told him one thing. "You didn't steal my wife. She made her own choices. But you lost a friend because you chose to lie." When I went back inside, my wife was waiting. She looked exhausted. "I ended it with him," she said. I didn't respond. "I swear," she continued, "I finally realized what he was doing." I asked, "Did you end it because you wanted me back, or because he wasn't who you thought he was?" She looked down. That silence told me everything. She wanted to say the right thing, but she couldn't. I nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She started crying again. "Please don't do this." I replied, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm finally letting your choices speak for themselves." The following week, I moved into the apartment I had quietly arranged. I took only my clothes, a few books, and the photographs that belonged to me. My wife stood in the doorway, watching me carry the last box to my car. "Are you really leaving?" she asked. I looked back at our house. 8 years of memories were inside those walls. Some beautiful, some painful, but I knew I couldn't stay simply because leaving hurt. Yes, I said, I'm leaving. She stepped forward. What if I change? I answered honestly, I hope you do, but you need to change yourself not to get me back. For several weeks, she kept calling. At first, I didn't answer. Then I agreed to meet her once at a quiet cafe. She looked different. There was no confidence, no attitude, no talk about other men. She looked like the woman I had married years ago. She reached across the table. I miss you. I looked at her hand, but didn't take it. I miss who we used to be, too. She whispered, Can we start again? I took a breath. You can't start again by pretending nothing happened. She nodded. Then tell me what I have to do. I said, Nothing for me. You need to learn how to live with the consequences of what you chose. Months passed. I rebuilt my life slowly. I started exercising again, spent more time with my family, and accepted invitations from friends I had ignored during my marriage. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly wondering where my wife was or whether her phone was hiding another secret. Peace felt strange at first. Then it became addictive. My wife eventually stopped calling every day. Instead, she sent one final message. I finally understand what you meant. I thought losing you would make you fight harder. I never imagined losing you would mean you simply wouldn't come back. I stared at that message for a long time. There was a version of me who would have done anything to save our marriage. But that man had disappeared the night. She told me I needed to compete for her love. I didn't hate her. I didn't hate Daniel either. I simply understood that some doors close because the person on the other side finally learns their worth. A year later, I received one more message from her. She told me she had started therapy, changed her life, and finally accepted responsibility for what she had done. She didn't ask me to return. She didn't ask for another chance. She simply said, You were right. I didn't realize what I had until you stopped trying to prove your love. I read the message, smiled sadly, and put my phone away. Because sometimes the strongest way to love someone is to stop chasing them when they have already chosen to leave. My wife told me to fight for her. I didn't. I walked away.